Hello and welcome to In Depth. I'm Tina Jha. Nearly 10 years after a bitter civil war waged by the LTTE ended in Sri Lanka, the island nation saw a wave of bomb attacks that reduced Easter Sunday into a mammoth tragedy. At the last count, the blasts in churches and hotels had killed 321 people and left 500 wounded. On Tuesday, Sri Lanka held its first mass funeral amid a day of mourning for the victims. A state of emergency is in effect to prevent further attacks. The Islamic State terror group has claimed responsibility for the attack, even as Sri Lanka's government launched a crackdown on a local Islamist group, National Thowheed Jamath or NTJ. The police have so far detained 40 suspects. Among them is a Syrian national. But what led to Sri Lanka's Easter carnage? Who are the perpetrators and what were they trying to achieve, and who are the victims? We look at these questions today in depth. On Sunday, 21st April, the island nation of Sri Lanka was rocked by a series of coordinated blasts, killing over 320 people and injuring 500 others. 3 prominent churches and 3 top luxury hotels were targeted in capital Colombo and adjoining areas. 2 days after the attack, the Islamic State terror group on Tuesday claimed responsibility for the bombings. In a statement, the Islamic State terror group said the blasts were the work of fighters of the group, but did not provide any proof to substantiate its claim. More than 280 victims killed were Sri Lankan nationals, but at least 38 foreigners are also among the dead. They include British, Indian, Danish, Dutch, Swiss, Spanish, Australian, as well as Turkish nationals.
Bomb blasts in Sri Lanka, shock waves felt across the world. When the dead were counted, the victims included many foreigners. Danish billionaire Anders Holst Poulsen lost 3 children. 4 days ago, one of his children had posted a picture on Instagram geotagged Sri Lanka. Poulsen owns the bestseller clothing chain. He is also the largest stakeholder in the popular online retailer ASOS. Among the 10 Indian nationals, 7 were JDS workers from Bangalore. Karnataka Chief Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy said he knew some of them personally. The JDS activists were on a leisure trip to Sri Lanka. They were killed in the blast that took place very close to their breakfast table in Shangri-La Hotel. Eyewitnesses who rushed to the scene of the blasts at the luxury hotels and churches spoke of the horrific scenes. An Australian survivor recounted the moment a bomb went off during an Easter Sunday service. The blast killed his wife and daughter.
Very many times there's a bomb blast. I heard about a huge noise. Then I jumped into the church and I saw that my daughter and my wife was on the floor. I don't know what to do. And I was just saw my daughter on the floor. And I tried to lift it up. It's already exactly the same. Next, my wife is there.
Sudesh had himself walked out of the church just minutes before the blast. His family had moved from Melbourne in 2014 after his wife started a business in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan officials said in all at least 31 foreigners were killed. They included British, Indian, Danish, Saudi, Chinese and Turkish nationals. Of the 8 British nationals who died, 3 of them, Anita Nicholson, her 14-year-old son Alex and 11-year-old daughter Annabelle, died in the restaurant of the Shangri-La Hotel. On Tuesday, memorial services were held in the courtyard of a church. More than 100 people were killed in the St. Sebastian Church of Negombo, where the roof was almost entirely blown off by the force of the explosion. The list of the dead had Sri Lankan celebrity chef Shanta Mayadune and her daughter Nisanga. Shanta Mayadune was one of the first victims to be identified. Nisanga posted a picture of the family having breakfast in the Shangri-La Hotel in Colombo. Another victim was the grandson of Bangladeshi MP Sheikh Fazlul Karim Salim, a prominent member of the Awami League political party. The boy's father was also injured in the blast. The attacks prompted an advisory by China not to travel to Sri Lanka in the near future. The US State Department has also warned of possible further attacks. Experts say the targeting of churches and hotels where foreign tourists stay in Sri Lanka is a new and worrying development in the predominantly Buddhist country. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The Easter bomb attacks have highlighted rifts in Sri Lanka's leadership. After it emerged that authorities were warned about an imminent threat, security agencies had been watching the NTJ jihadist group, reports said, and had notified the police about a possible attack. But Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and the cabinet claimed they had no information regarding the attacks.
The origins of what appears to be a spectacular security failure in Sri Lanka go back more than 2 weeks. On April 4th, foreign intelligence agencies told Sri Lankan officials of a potential plot to launch suicide attacks on churches and tourist destinations. 5 days later, on April 9th, the country's defense ministry informed the Inspector General of Police of this alleged plot and named a group believed to be behind the plan, the National Thowheed Jamath. Unusually, the memo also included a list of suspects. On April 11th, another memo signed by the country's deputy IGP was circulated widely to a range of security services and some government ministries. That memo also laid out the threat and again contained a list of suspects. A Sri Lankan government minister claimed that US and Indian governments had warned them of imminent attacks in early April. All of this came against the backdrop of the divisions within government that lingered from the constitutional crisis of 2018. Sri Lankan minister also claimed that the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was kept in the dark about the warnings. He added as the Prime Minister was removed from the National Security Council in December and therefore did not receive confidential security briefings. However, President Sirisena's office did not comment on the apparent failure to heed warnings. Experts point out that violence is not new to Sri Lanka. The country suffered a great deal from the left-wing rebellion in 1970s. The 30-year waged by the LTTE further killed tens of thousands of people. All of that, however, had become a thing of the past for the island nation. Till the suicide attacks of Easter on Sunday changed that with pinpoint devastation. The choice of luxury hotels and Christians as a target and highly coordinated operation all pointed to a global jihadist hand. The attacks were a departure from the past is another important aspect. In the Sri Lankan civil war, foreign tourists were always spared. The latest bombings seem to have the fingerprints of the Islamic State and the Al-Qaeda.
Thowheed Jamath is a very recent phenomenon, and they don't really have the reputation of being a ferocious terror organization which has killed hundreds of people. This is the first attack that has been blamed on them. Till now, they have been responsible for minor incidents like breaking Buddha statues. There was also some time back, the Sri Lankan security forces had apprehended a few people transporting detonators and explosives. But even that was not seen as a very large attempt at creating the kind of terrorism that we just saw. So what could have happened right under the noses of the security agencies and the intelligence agencies is that somehow this organization created a link with international terror organization and quickly developed the capacities to have explosions like this. But having said that, the ISIS is known to have these templated terror formulas. Regardless of which country they operate in, all they have to do is to take that formula, they fit it and execute the plan, to make explosives, to train the people to conduct suicide bombings and to execute large-scale terror attacks like this.
India's National Investigation Agency has said that it was ready to send a team to Colombo to study the series of blasts. Given the scale of the attack, Indian agencies believe it could not have pulled off without external help in logistics and training. The agency is likely to request the Home Ministry of India to take a call on the visit, since an attack so close to India's shores could have implications for the country. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Time for a short break on the program. On the other side, we get you reactions from world leaders on these horrific attacks. Do stay tuned.
Watch The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira, at 6:30 p.m.
Priya Dutt is not very accessible for the people. She doesn't mingle with the people easily.
I love working with people. So the question of me not being connected to people it's really baseless.
5 years, you've lost touch with the ground, you lost touch with the people.
I haven't lost touch with the people. My office was always open.
Your brother Sanjay Dutt campaigning for you?
Yes, of course. He will be campaigning for me.
Watch a special interview with the Congress leader Priya Dutt only on Rajya Sabha television.
The prolific British poet and story writer Joseph Rudyard Kipling, one of the first masters of short stories in English. In 1894 appeared his Jungle Book, which became a children's classic all over the world. Kim, the story of Kimball O'Hara and his adventures in the Himalayas, is perhaps his most felicitous work published. Set in and concerned with India he had come to know and love so well. In 1907, Kipling became the first English language writer to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Mihir Sen, an outstanding and extraordinary saltwater swimmer of India. He is the first Asian to swim the English Channel way back in 1958. And just 8 years later, in 1966, he swam the 7 seas of the 5 continents in 1 calendar year, which etched his name in the Guinness Book of World Records. In 1959, he was also conferred the Padma Shri, and in 1967 he was awarded the Padma Bhushan.
Welcome back. You're watching In Depth. So as Sri Lanka mourned its people in a 3-minute silence observed across the country, a senior minister in the Lankan parliament revealed that the attack was in retaliation for the mosque attacks in New Zealand last month. A look at the details in this report.
The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the Easter Sunday attacks that killed more than 320 people in Sri Lanka. Preliminary investigations revealed that the attacks were in response to the mass shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand in March. In an address to the Sri Lankan Parliament, Defence Minister Ruwan Wijewardene said the deadly shootings claimed 50 lives in 2 mosques on 15th March in Christchurch. On Tuesday, a shell-shocked Sri Lanka started a day of national mourning with a 3-minute nationwide silence to pay homage to the people killed in the country's worst terror attack. Police also arrested 40 suspects, including a Syrian national, for the deadly Easter bombings. Sri Lankan President on Monday declared emergency in the island nation that essentially gives the police, army, navy and the air force additional power to stop, search and detain suspects. These powers were used by the police during the civil war but withdrawn when it ended.
ඒ වගේම රටේ ආර්ථිකයත් අස්ථාවර කිරීමේ බරපතල තත්ත්වයක් ලෙස මා දකිනවා. විශේෂයෙන් ආගමික සිද්ධාස්ථාන හා ප්‍රධාන හෝටල් කීපයක් ඉලක්ක කොටගෙන එල්ල වූ මේ ප්‍රහාරය මා තරයේ හෙලා දකිනවා.
In Sri Lanka's worst terror attack, 7 suicide bombers carried out a series of 8 blasts that ripped through 3 churches and luxury hotels on Sunday, killing over 320 people and wounding more than 500 others, including 38 foreigners. The first wave of attacks struck during packed Easter Sunday services between 8:45 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. Suicide bombers struck 3 churches around the country's St. Anthony's, a popular shrine in the capital Colombo, St. Sebastian in Negombo, north of the capital, and the Zion Church in the eastern port city of Batticaloa. About the same time, more blasts ripped through 3 luxury hotels in Colombo, the Shangri-La, the Cinnamon Grand, and the Kingsbury, all popular with foreign tourists and the country's business community. Later in the day, a blast rocked a hotel in front of the Dehiwala Zoo in Dehiwala, Mount Lavinia. The final blast struck a private house in Dematagora during a raid in connection with the earlier attacks, in which 3 police officers were also killed. 7 of the 8 bombings were carried out by suicide bombers, with 6 of them having no criminal background. Another minor explosion was reported in Colombo on Monday as Sri Lanka's bomb disposal unit was trying to defuse 3 bombs that were found in an abandoned vehicle. Police also discovered 87 low explosive detonators abandoned at Colombo's main public bus station in Pita area.
So this attack, what I feel, cannot be done by the local organizations, but it has the support of an organization like Daesh or the ISIS, which has used the potent ground there, used local support, trained them and executed a plan like this. If you see, Daesh has always attacked Western targets. The reason why some analysts believe Easter was chosen and Christian worshippers were chosen is to avenge what happened in New Zealand a few years ago, although there's no corroboration for this. But that's what some security experts feel, that there was a similar situation there where mosque people were praying and there was an attack in which innocent Muslims were killed, and they wanted to have something like that here. Why 5-star hotels? Because Westerners have always been on the target of the Daesh and ISIS wherever in the world they attack. So the template that they followed or the fingerprints here are of Daesh or ISIS, but the execution may have had the help of some right-wing Muslim groups which are fringe groups in Sri Lanka.
Police also suspected the role of a little-known Islamist extremist group, the National Thowheed Jamath, in connection with the blasts. Not much is known about the NTJ, but the group is believed to a breakaway faction of another hardline Islamist group in the country, the Sri Lanka Thowheed Jamath. Some reports have also linked to the NTJ to a spate of vandalism last December that targeted Buddhist temples in central Sri Lanka. A nationwide alert sent by police on April 11 specified that NTJ was preparing to carry out attacks on churches and the Indian High Commission. Meanwhile, the Sri Lankan government on Tuesday apologized for its failure to act despite receiving advance intelligence inputs about the possibility of terror attacks. Government spokesperson Rajita Senaratne said that the warnings about the blasts were received in the days before the attacks, and one of the warnings referred to the NTJ. On Monday, the government admitted that it failed to act on multiple warnings before the attacks.
300 people have died, over 500 people have been injured, severely injured, some are disabled. So we are very sorry as a government, we have to say, and we have to apologize to the families and the other institutions about this incident.
The attacks were the worst ever against the country's small Christian minority, accounting for 7.4% of the total population of 21.4 million. According to census data, 70.2% of Sri Lankans identify as Buddhist, 12% Hindu and 9.7% Muslim. According to industry official, tourism, which accounts for around 5% of Sri Lanka's GDP, is set to take a serious beating following the blasts. The tourism officials confirmed that many tourists were cutting short their stays. The tourism in the country is expected to remain low at least during the next 3 months. The blasts shattered a decade of peace in the island nation since the end of the brutal civil war with the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. The civil war ended with the defeat of the LTTE, which ran a military campaign for a separate Tamil homeland in the northern and eastern part of the island nation for nearly 30 years. The LTTE collapsed in 2009 after the Lankan army killed its supreme leader, V. Prabhakaran. An estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people were killed in the civil war. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
World leaders have widely condemned the Easter Sunday bomb blast that ripped through churches and luxury hotels in Sri Lanka. The explosions are the first major attacks on the Indian Ocean island since the end of the civil war 10 years ago. In a Twitter message, President Ramnath Kovind called the terror attack senseless violence aimed at innocent people. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu said, India stands in solidarity with the Lankan government and people in this hour of distress and called upon the world community to unite against terrorism. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also condemned the terror attack, saying there was no place for such barbarism. He said India stands strongly with Sri Lanka, ready to provide any kind of help that the Lankan government and the people might need.
आतंकवाद कितना भयंकर है, हर दिन दुनिया में कहीं न कहीं धरती को खून के रंग सा रंग दिया जाता है। आज श्रीलंका में जो कुछ भी हुआ है, श्रीलंका वासियों के प्रति भारत पूरी मजबूती के साथ खड़ा है। ऐसी संकट की घड़ी में भारत श्रीलंका की जो भी मदद कर सकता है, हर मदद के लिए तैयार है।
US President Donald Trump expressed his heartfelt condolences to the people of Sri Lanka on the horrible terror attacks and said Americans stand ready for help. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also condemned the blast in the strongest terms and confirmed US citizens were among those killed. He said the US stands with the Sri Lankan government and people as they confront violent extremism. British Prime Minister Theresa May said the attacks were truly appalling and conveyed her deepest sympathies to those affected by this tragedy. She urged the global community to stand together so that no one has to practice their faith in fear. British Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt said the UK is ready to offer whatever help is needed from Britain to Sri Lanka. Chinese President Xi Jinping, in his message to Sri Lanka, said the Chinese government and people firmly stand by the people of Sri Lanka and support the Sri Lankan government's efforts to maintain national security and stability. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe offered his condolences and said that such terrorist acts cannot be forgiven. French President Emmanuel Macron also called on the international community to do more to fight terrorism, condemning the attacks in Sri Lanka. While Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison also condemned the horrific attack in Sri Lanka and offered heartfelt sympathy and support to the Asian country. Pope Francis deplored the attacks in Sri Lanka and called for universal condemnation of what he said were terrorist acts, inhuman acts that could never be justified. As a show of solidarity, the Eiffel Tower turned off its lights on Sunday midnight to honor the victims of the Sri Lanka bombings. So that's it from us in this edition of In Depth. You can also watch our episodes online on YouTube and Twitter. And don't forget to send your feedback and suggestions about our program. Thank you very much for your time.